ask everyone to find a seat. Thanks for coming. You are very brave. The city has been really disturbed by strikes. The subway doesn't work, the trams are stopped, trade unions are demonstrating in the streets, but you still made it. It means you're really interested in the topic of tonight. It's 6 p.m., so even more. Unless someone has promised a fantastic cocktail at the end, you must be interested in the subject matter and in hearing from our fantastic speakers. So my name is Andrea Renda. I'm the Director of Research here at CEPS, having been with this organization for a long time. I teach digital policy also at the European University Institute. And I'm very happy to be here for this 7th dialogue, policy dialogue, co-organized by CEPS with what Italians would say CDP, but in principle, then we end up always pronouncing CDP with our colleagues, otherwise they don't understand, which is Cassa Depositi e Prestiti. And it's been very successful until now. It helps us go deep into specific topics, in particular when it comes to the funding of innovation, the development of investment at the national level, but in a way that is functional to the unfolding of the European vision for innovation and investment in the future. The landscape for investment and innovation is always a little bit controversial in Europe, right? People typically say, we're very good at research, we are not very good at translating research into innovation, but to some extent, if you look at the data, we are actually also good at innovation. Sometimes it's the diffusion of innovation and the uptake of innovative solutions that becomes a problem. There's also big polarization in many of our markets between leading firms that are typically able to catch up with innovative developments and invest at a very high level, and several lagging firms that remain a little bit at the fringes of the market. Now, in all this, the EU institutions have had, well, there's been actually no shortage of initiatives over time to try and bring and speed up innovation and to really promote more innovative solutions at the EU level. The new European Innovation Agenda is one of the latest of these big attempts. I remember, since I've been around for a long time, I could go back, 20 years, the Lisbon Agenda, the Europe 2020 Agenda. There have been constant attempts to make Europe more innovative. We've had commissioners and services in the Commission trying to do this more and more. How are we doing with this? And are we performing decently? Are we performing spectacularly? Are we lagging behind? Is the role played by individual development banks, for example, and promotional banks at the national level, making a difference, with some countries being performing better than others? Is there space for improving the framework conditions for innovation at the EU level? Is this something that depends more on the national level, or some good practices that we might be able to identify today? Or is this something that can also be done to some extent by comparing notes and developing solutions at the pan-European level? We will hear about all this. So we at CEPS look at this pretty much in depth. I just can remind what I was mentioning to some of you before. Recently, we've published a paper in which we were looking at one specific domain, although pretty pervasive, if you wish, and multi-sectoral, which is the domain of artificial intelligence in Europe. It's considered to be a technology that is somehow general purpose, so potentially pervasive and permeating different sectors and use cases in the economy. We looked at not only at patents, where we see Europe potentially lagging behind other parts of the world. We look at skills, and we don't see that. We see Europe actually creating and developing more talented researchers than the US, but then where do they end up? They don't stay here, okay? And we look at venture capital. And there's a number of very interesting interactive graphs that we've been producing. We can also distribute them. We see 61% of the venture capital at the moment in AI ending up in the US, 17% in China, and only 6% coming to the EU. Is this because we don't have the money? Is this because we don't have the ideas? Well, it seems to be neither of these things. But I'm not going to be the one that solves all the mysteries today, because it's time to hear from our keynote speaker. And then after our keynote speaker, we shed light on how the what national venture capital investors can do to help the unfolding and the development of the new European innovation agenda, we will have a panel moderated by Martina Colombo from GDP. Yes, we are Italians, and Martina will then introduce our fantastic three panelists that could gather with us today. So, no further ado. Again, thanks to Cassa Depositi e Prestiti for teaming up with us. I'll introduce. I want to really pronounce your title properly because, of course, I don't remember it by heart. Andras Inotai is the head of unit for innovation policy and access to finance. So it seems to be relatively pertinent, right, compared to the to the topic of today. In the Directorate General for Research and Innovation in the European Commission, we ask you to give a 15-minute address, and we'll see if there will be questions and answers at the end. If there's some time, we'll collect some questions for you. So, Andras, welcome to the podium. Welcome to CEPS. I give you the microphone. Yes.
Thank you. I'm happy to switch the slides myself if there is a control. And then is that on the right there? Thanks. Okay, anyway, I kick off. Thank you very much, Andrea, and buonasera a tutti. It's a great pleasure to be here, and you know that the topic is important and relevant if there is an event organized by CEPS around that topic. So that is a really a great opportunity and a pleasure to be here with you. I am indeed heading the unit in DG Research and Innovation, which is in charge of access to finance and innovation policy. And my team was in charge of developing the new European innovation agenda, of which I will now say a few words if I find the slides.
We need to make sure that your presentation is on.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I actually can start without the slides. Just to reflect what brought the European Commission to decide 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, to develop a new European innovation agenda. And the reason behind that was that there is a new wave of innovation happening globally, and that new wave of innovation is deep tech innovation, which is different from all previous kinds of innovation. It's very much about going from the lab to the market very quickly. It has a very high technological component. It is extremely risky. And if it succeeds, it requires a huge amount of capital to scale up very quickly. The Commission has decided that it's time for Europe to actually lead this new wave of innovation. We have missed out a bit on previous innovation cycles. And it also turns out that the EU is extremely well placed to lead on this type of innovation. Why is that? It is because it has all the necessary ingredients. It has excellent talent and science, and as we have said, you do require great research from labs to go straight to the market often. As you know, with only 6% of the EU population, we have the EU is producing 20% of the top scientific publications. We are still leading in certain areas of international patents, like green patents. You also need quite a strong manufacturing base to be successful in deep tech innovation. The EU does have that. The EU is an industrial powerhouse. You see it? Oh. Oh. Okay. I send it to you quickly because there are quite some interesting slides that and data that I would. Okay, I'll do that in 1 second.
Okay. What do you want to hear about? Something or not? No, we'll just, if you can do this right away so that we will benefit from the visuals as well, right? But indeed, we checked. Something must have gone wrong in the communication flow.
Where do I send it?
You can send it to me, andrea.renda@ceps.eu.
RENDA.
RENDA? Yeah, he got me there.
Okay, we got you there. Very good.
Okay. And I will go and make sure that.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Um, So industrial manufacturing base. So if you look at things like wind turbines, 4 out of 10 of the global leading wind turbine producers are in the EU. The EU is responsible for about a third of that global market. It's not in itself deep tech, right? Wind turbines you would not necessarily characterize like as deep tech, maybe some components of it. But it does show that if you want to scale up a deep tech innovation, you do have a huge industrial base in Europe that will be helpful for that. You also have talent, so not only science, but also talent and graduates. The EU is now producing 50% more graduates in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics than the US. Hasn't always been like that. We are increasing the lead in that area. And we have a really vibrant ecosystem of SMEs and startups. We have actually caught up with the US in terms of startup creation. There is equal amount of capital flying into European startups than into US startups. At the level of startups, we are on par, about taking 1/3 each of the global capital, below 5 million euros per startups. And if you look at things like the digital startup landscape in Europe, in the last 7 years, the EU digital startup ecosystem has been growing twice as fast as the US. So they're really good bases. But there's also political imperative. There's also political imperative to deep tech innovation and to lead in the area of deep tech innovation. And that is because we believe that it is only through that innovation that you can really address the challenges of the twin transition, so the green and the digital. We know that about 1/3 of the CO2 reductions that you still need to do to reach carbon neutrality will come from new technologies, which do not exist yet. So you have about 2/3 of the technologies which are there already that you can scale up. About 1/3, it's probably not yet available, and it needs to be researched, demonstrated, and then scaled up. So that's green and digital transition. But it's also an imperative because Europe wants to become more strategically autonomous. And this is something which, of course, you have seen recently gaining traction since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And there are huge opportunities in finding innovative alternatives to your standard supply chains. The business is ready for that. So if you look at the business community, 1/3 of German companies are fundamentally considering to restructure their supply chains. This is a huge opportunity for European producers and European innovative technologies to step in and to make the EU more resilient. So this is the background. This is the background which then led to the Commission to say we need a new strategy. We need a new strategy which I think for really the first time brings together the whole Commission, all policy DGs, led by DG Research and Innovation, looking at all the instruments that the Commission has, and not only the Commission, also the member states, and said, okay, we have five main areas in which we need to do more. Because that will be the success, the guarantee of success for innovation in Europe. So the first area is access to finance. What can we do to improve access to finance, in particular for deep tech companies? It's not only about the money. So the money, part of the money is out there. You have the money. Member states are spending 40 billion euros from the Recovery and Resilience Facility for research and innovation. You have InvestEU. which with more than 300 billion euros of budget is providing support for investments. A big part of that to innovative companies. We will come to that. Okay. And you do have, of course, Horizon Europe and the EU budget with a number of instruments to support specifically innovation. The crown jewel of that framework is now the European Innovation Council, which allows direct equity investments into the most innovative companies. Since its operation started a bit more than a year ago, it has already invested more than 1 billion euros in about 160 companies, which could be potentially the new unicorns of the world. So that's funding for deep tech scale-ups. Let's see where we stand. So there are 25 actions in this new European Innovation Agenda, according to 5 major flagships. First one is deep tech scale-up financing. You see, it's not only about the money. So there are a number of regulatory instruments which will help SMEs better access finance. There was a Commission proposal. This has already been completed. So everywhere where you see completed, that's an agenda item that has been already delivered. We said, okay, you need to make the equity market more attractive. So you need to reduce the difference, the bias between debt and equity, which exists in many member states. Or for corporate income tax, you should be able to deduce from your corporate income tax under the same conditions, the cost of your debt and your equity. So that proposal is on the table. We then have a Listings Act, which will improve listings in the EU, i.e. companies going public in the EU. That's one of the biggest problems. We are creating companies very well. We are even growing them, not so well anymore, but the real problem comes when they go public, and they very, very often decide to go public, not in the EU. So we said, let's have a Listings Act, which will simplify the conditions under which these companies can go public in the EU. And it will also include a number of additional incentives. For example, possibilities for founders to retain control, certain control, after the company goes public, so different types of shares. Again, proposal already adopted last year. Both of these are now with the co-legislators. So if you know someone in the Council and the European Parliament, please let them know that both of them need to be adopted rather quickly. And then we have a number of examples where we can improve late-stage venture capital financing. Why is that important? That is important because that is the key funding area where the EU is lagging behind. If you look at funding rounds in MB, serious funding rounds above 100 million euros, you see that the EU share, the EU venture capital share in particular, is diminishing, and progressively US investors take over in that investment scene. So we have 2 particular initiatives that we hinted at in the new European Innovation Agenda. We have an excellent initiative of the EIF, the European Scale-up Action for Risk Capital. Essentially what it does is that it allows an institutional investor to invest on a non-pari passu basis alongside the EIF, i.e. it limits the downside risk for institutional investors, and we hope that through that it increases appetite for institutional investors to invest in European venture capital funds. So there is a call out now for institutional investors to come and apply until January 2024, and we do hope that there will be sufficient traction. So that's one initiative. And then, of course, you have the European Tech Champion Initiative, launched earlier this year with the EIB and 5 member states, now with a budget of more than 3.5 billion euros, which again targets specifically big funds above 1 billion euros to then invest in, with those ticket sizes of 50, 100 million in companies in their later growth stage. So we do hope that this will improve the innovation financing landscape. And there are a number of additional actions specifically to increase diversity. We have a good evidence that diversity in investment, gender diversity in particular, is good for the investors. So we do hope that some of these actions will support that. Okay, so that's one big area of the innovation agenda. The second major flagship, it's not about the money anymore, it's about regulation. It's about the regulatory landscape. And if you read a number of surveys of investors, what is the main factor for deciding where you invest and how you invest? Many of them, the majority would probably say, it's the overall regulatory landscape. So we're doing a lot of things there. First, if you want to innovate, you do need sometimes to be a bit more relaxed about the regulation that is out there. So we want to promote the use of regulatory sandboxes. This is a really handy thing. It essentially allows either the EU or the member states to temporarily and under certain conditions suspend or derogate from the basic regulatory rules to allow a new technology to be tested on the real market terms. Think about self-driving cars, think about blockchain or AI. We have a guidance document which for the first time presents the landscape in the EU, what is out there, what are member states doing. We do hope that people will pick it up and put in place new regulatory sandboxes. I will not present all of them, but I want to mention number 4, state aid framework, really important. So we do have now more relaxed rules for supporting R&I in the investments, in particular in technology infrastructures. That wasn't the case until now. And I also want to mention the 5th action, which is innovation procurement. Now, innovation procurement has a huge potential. The EU is completely underperforming, underusing the potential of innovation procurement. If we could double the size of the innovation procurement market, that would cater for a huge amount of the startup needs to get their first customer. There's nothing better for a European innovative startup than to get your first customer, not a grant, not even an equity, get your first customer. The way to do that, one of the ways, is if you benefit from a innovation procurement from your municipality, region, or member state. We want to help them, so there is a special advisory service which we will put in place to connect possible innovative startups with innovation procurement supply side municipalities, so they can see how what opportunities are there. Okay. Now, the third main area, third flagship, bear with me, we only have 5. This is the third flagship. It's about improving European innovation ecosystems. The main problem there that we have a very divergent landscape of regions in the EU. So out of the nearly 250 regions, a huge difference between the most innovative and the least innovative, 10 times. If you look at the innovation performance of our regions, the most innovative one is 10 times more innovative than the least innovative one. So we have launched a new initiative, which is called Regional Innovation Valleys. What it does is that it brings together 5 regions, 2 from least developed regions, moderate or emerging innovators, and at least 1 from a leading innovator region or strong innovator, 5 of them, and they need to agree on a joint program, how they will together develop innovation. But not only that, they will need to also put in place 3 or 4 specific inter-regional innovation projects. So this can be anything from technological development, market deployment, but also connecting supply chains across Europe. We have received altogether nearly 1,000 applicants when the call closed. It's not a huge budget, mind you. It's 120 million or so. It's peanuts compared to the money out there, but we hope that this will act as an additional incentive for the regions to start cooperating and to bring also the innovation stakeholders with them. So we are analyzing now the proposals. We hope to announce them at the R&I week in March 2024, and the successful regions will become what we call regional innovation valleys. And that creates a huge number of opportunities. We might have up to 100. I cannot tell you how many there will be at the end. We might have up to 100 regional innovation valleys. And these can be the sort of future Silicon Valleys of the EU, in particularly in some deep tech areas, which are the most important for the EU's strategic development in areas like energy efficiency, reducing dependence on fossil fuel, or food security for that matter. So we will look at thematic innovation valleys. Okay, and maybe one action to mention is the one-stop shop for innovation ecosystem players. So that's number 4. We will change the name because InnoSpace apparently exists in Germany, and the Germans were rather lukewarm about using that name for an EU-driven project. So we'll change the name. The name doesn't really matter. What it is a one-stop shop. So if you're an innovator, you have a small SME or a bigger SME, a startup, and you are looking for funding, advice, IP help, regulatory certainty, innovation procurement, you would be able to go to a single place and possibly driven by an AI motor, and it will be able to help you in your future growth through hooking you up with the most appropriate providers of those services that a startup or a scale-up would need. The 4th flagship area is talents. I mentioned the good baseline for the European talent. What we lack a bit is deep tech talent in particular. So with the EIT, the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, we have launched what is called the Deep Tech Talent Initiative. We want to train 1 million deep tech talent. There are already 700,000 pledges that have been made by companies, universities, training centers. And we do hope that we will reach the 1 million figure. Deep tech talent is absolutely crucial if you want to win the race for the deep tech leadership in the world. And let me point number 5. So that is a startup employee stock options initiative. We have seen that those countries where you do have employee stock options regimes in place, allowing an employee of a startup to be paid through stocks, that can have a very positive effect on startup creation and the growth of these companies. So we are discussing now in the European Innovation Council forum different options of what needs to be done at the EU level to improve the conditions for employee stock options. In the interest of time, I will skip quickly to the 5th main area. This is really just policy making. What we want to do, first, have better definitions, because you cannot really compare the innovation landscape in the EU, but also globally, if you do not have proper definitions for startups, scale-ups, and deep tech innovation. And currently, although there are a number of innovation definitions out there, there's no uniform definition. So we want to see how that could be done, and then to reflect that in the European Startup Scoreboard, and then to include that in the European Innovation Scoreboard, because it might be that the 32 indicators that we currently use in the Innovation Scoreboard does not cover all aspects and all relevant aspects of innovation, including, for example, the presence of startups and scale-ups. And then maybe about the different support that we are giving to member states, and I will come to that, because the innovation agenda is not about what the Commission is doing, it's about what it is doing together with the member states. So we are using a number of facility support instruments. This is essentially financial support that allows member states to do R&I policy reforms, institutional reforms, governance reforms. So there's a bit of money out there as well to help them do that. Okay, last point. This is not about the Commission, it's about the EU and the member states. So what we have also done after the innovation agenda was launched, we asked member states, what are you doing around those 5 flagship areas that are helpful, that are also supporting the same objectives? And so far we have received more than 160 actions from member states and also associated countries to Horizon Europe. And it's a huge amount of very powerful actions that member states are doing, both in the area of access to finance, also preparing strengthening local ecosystems, and the number of actions, Digital Academy, or the Innovators Activity, or the Make It in Germany initiative of the German government for talent, that is very much in the same vein, same direction that the European Innovation Agenda. Now, what will happen now? The next step in the process is we are close to finalizing a report on the innovation agenda, which will see the first 18 months of implementation, also the member state actions, and then we will see. This will be published in March 2024 as well. We will see if this will be a useful input to the upcoming discussions, both running up to the parliamentary elections and also the setting up of the new European Commission, to see how innovation can play possibly an even more important role now that the discussion is shifting very much to the importance of competitiveness. So that's a clinch to the future, and we'll see where we end up with that. So I'll stop here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Andras, and it's good that we eventually even managed to give you the visuals behind you, so we fixed that. We're a bit behind schedule, so I suggest that I hand over to the moderator, Martina Colombo, and then she will introduce the panelists, and we will have then a Q&A with all the speakers, okay?
Very good, thank you very much. May I ask Antigone, David and Philippe to join me here on the stage, please. So our speakers tonight, yeah, please have a seat. I will hand it over. So Antigone Limperopoulou, the Chief Executive Officer of HDBI. She started her career working for the Hellenic Ministry of Finance from 1999 to 2001. She then moved to work for HDBI, where she has been actively involved with the development of the organization as well as the industry operations, since she served as an investment manager since 2001. Parallel to her tasks with HDBI, Antigone is also an advisor to the European Commission on venture capital, private equity, and access to risk finance. Then we have David Rougeot here next to me. David is Deputy Director of BPI France Deep Tech Division, in charge of steering 5 billion euros deep tech plan to create an economic champions of tomorrow based on disruptive technologies. It was quite a challenging task to spend all this money on that. David was a strategy consultant for 7 years, and in 2018 he joined BPI France to work on structuring the deep tech department at BPI. And then we have Philippe Laquet. Philippe, welcome. Philippe is the group manager at PMV Corporate Finance. He joined PMV in 2009, and today is responsible for the financing of Flemish companies through indirect investments in funds, guarantee schemes, direct financing of starters and growth companies. Quite a diversified job, Philippe, you have. Philippe started his professional career as a consultant at McKinsey and later at BCG. So welcome. Welcome tonight. We heard the interesting agenda from the European Commission, and we now try to understand through a round of 3 questions, which I will ask you in 3 rounds, to dig a little bit more into what we are doing on this innovation agenda. So let me start with first question. So the new European innovation agenda is essentially a deep tech agenda, as we heard from Andreas. And for the first time ever, deep tech startups are at the center of the EU innovation policy. So what are you doing in your countries to support and foster this agenda? Let me start with Antigone, and then David, and then Philippe. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. And I have to admit 2 things. First, that this photo is from 2001, when the Lisbon agenda was in place, and we're struggling to fit it in our programs, the Lisbon agenda. Let me also add that I currently run the Equity Fund of Funds of Greece. Back then, it was a much smaller vehicle, and we had imposed the requirement for an investment, the investment to be made in companies that were innovative in 2001. In 2007, we had to remove this restriction because innovation was very strictly defined and there was no pipeline. So we opened it up. Just a comment to realize how we are and how long have we proceeded since then. So, having said that, I realized from Andras' presentation that it's not only about deep tech, if I'm allowed to say that. It's a lot of more things that are included in this agenda. And I'm very satisfied that I heard that the European Commission touches a lot of important aspects like the talent, how to retain the talent, skilling and reskilling, which is something I didn't hear. Anyway, we in Greece, in this small country, we have developed the VC ecosystem the last 3-4 years incredibly. The Greek government and the policies are doing fantastic. And it's the first time that we have all the ingredients are streamlined, let's say. So we have the regulatory framework. We have tax incentives for business angels and for people returning back to Greece. We have also money. We have funds. We have more than 2 billion under management at HDBI, which is a huge amount for Greece. And taking into consideration also that the last 20 years, 300 million public funds were invested in funds. The last 4 years, we have already committed 500 million. 20 years compared to 3-4 years. So what we do, we listen carefully to the market, what is needed, and we design our programs because we don't manage European funds at this point. We manage public funds and funds from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And we deploy them through equity instruments to the Greek market. Of course, the market is one step ahead of us. So we didn't need this agenda or someone to tell us that deep tech is the real thing. We have committed already and invested in funds that invest in deep tech. And I think this is the second question. And this goes together with the scale up. Deep and scale up goes together. So,
Okay,
sorry,
okay. Thank you, Antigone. So let's move to France.
Yes.
So what do you tell us about this deep tech agenda?
First, I'm very glad to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And despite of the strikes, but I'm quite used to it back home. So yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so actually we started working on deep tech in 2019. It's quite special because in BPI France we are a venture capital, but we are also doing loans. Grants, and we also support the company. So we do quite an all-in-one and one-stop shop, kind of, not really, not most, but and we started in 2019 with this deep tech plan, which now reach 5 billion euros. That goes directly to the startup with 2 objectives. The first one is to double the number of startups created per year, but now the President Macron raised it up to 500 startups created per year. We benchmarked on the UK. The second objective is to make this startup grow and become technological leaders. And the third one is to structure the ecosystem. The idea is that at any moment of your life as an entrepreneur, you need to have the money, to have the support, and mostly at the end to have the clients. And so that's why we try to provide at every step of the way. And what is important when you do this is first to create a culture of entrepreneurship in the universities. That's one of our main goals. But also to create a culture of entrepreneurship for the people who do business, a culture of deep tech for the people who do business, so they can also create the startup. The second thing is that you have to take the risk as a national venture investor. You have to take the risk that the other investors don't take. And the third thing we do is we have a fund of fund activity, and we try to invest in deep tech funds and to create deep tech funds, because the main thing we need is money in deep tech.
Okay, thank you, David. And now, Philippe, what do you do now closer here in the Flemish region?
Yes, as you pointed out correctly, we do a lot at PMV, a lot of different caskets, so guarantees, loans, direct and indirect equity investments. Of course, as far as deep tech is concerned, for deep tech you need deep pockets. I hear PPI is 5 billion. Well, the balance sheet of PMV is 1.2 billion, so puts things in perspective. So we have to pick our fight if you want to invest in deep tech. I think correctly was pointed out that you have to look at ecosystems. And so we have a couple of nice ecosystems here in Flanders. Most of the time linked around or linked with innovative organizations, often linked with universities. So we try to invest in spin-offs from these organizations, but also help with the whole environment around such ecosystems. So that is a direct investments. Of course, if they reach a scale-up level, we often find that it's tough to find the necessary means to really help these companies raise 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 million rounds. So that is an issue. So come in the indirect investments or fund business, where we have a decent ecosystem of VC funds for the early stage, although you continuously have to work on renewing investments in these funds. As far as scale-up funds are concerned, we are working on it. We actually through EFIN, we got to know the Danish Growth Fund, where they managed to raise money from insurance companies, pension funds, and then channel it to investments in funds. So we created the Belgian Growth Fund a couple of years ago. Now we start fundraising for the second Belgian Growth Fund. And so that is a means of creating larger funds that can actually invest in with bigger tickets in scale-ups. Of course, the scale is still relatively small. If you really talk about the unicorns and so on, I mean, they need even more money. So then you look at European scale. So that's why we're also active in supporting Etsy, for example. I think it was mentioned also, the European Tech Champions Initiative, together with our federal colleagues. And we're also trying to create a Flemish biotech company that could also get money out of Etsy. But for the Flemish region, a 1 billion fund is a lot.
Is a big ticket. So, and in fact, you anticipated a bit the second question that I would like to put to your attention, which is precisely, it seems that the startup phase is managed. So with the innovation agenda, it seems that you managed to bridge the gap in the startup phase, but what happens then in the scale-up phase, and how would your institution help, let's say, the startups throughout their cycle and nurture centaurs, unicorns, decacorns, so on and so forth, and all these mythological beasts? Antigone.
So we are still struggling with the startup phase in Greece. It's not over. It's not completely satisfied yet. We have no scale-up fund active in Greece. I mean, although we have a couple of unicorns, and although technology in Greece is doing well. However, what we have done is that through this cooperation that you mentioned earlier, the EFIN, we build synergies, cooperations, and let me not forget our gratitude to BPI as well, that served as our mentor to our transformation, the transformation of our organization. We copy a lot of things because there's no need to reinvent the wheel if something has worked somewhere. So what we do, we bring together early stage investors and growth investors, so somehow to fill in the gap in the between in this scale up. We cooperate with 5 institutes: the BPI, KfW, Capital, AFO, CDB now, and I forget, and TESI. And we we review European funds that target the scale-ups. It's a teamwork, let's say. We have recently made our first investment in a French fund that will include Greece in its investment strategy. So there's an opportunity for Greek scale-ups to receive an investment, and even for the fund managers, which is the most essential part of this value chain, to get more extrovert and have connections with other European VCs, fund managers. Other than that, we are also looking to invest in Etsy as well, because we believe it's a good opportunity. This is pretty much what we do for the scale-up, to cover the scale-up, because it is indeed a requirement.
Thank you. And I hear with pleasure that you mentioned the partnership as one of the assets that you have.
It's an incredible asset. I cannot even describe the value, the knowledge, the wisdom that we acquire through these meetings. It's been now 12 years since 2011. We started with 5, 6 members, and now we are more than 20 something. Sorry, I forget the numbers, although I chair the thing this year. However, it's incredible how we interact and how we exchange freely information, and very professional, let's say, advice that is shared freely.
Very good. So now let me turn to the founder of EVFIN, no? Because I understand that it's BP France that initiated the process, and you kind of are the front runner, no? in this path. So how would you see this scaling up phase, and how
for me,
to cope with it?
The key of the scaling up phase are the corporates, because what an investor needs when they invest in a company is to have liquidity at the end. He wants to see either a large fundraising of 100 million euros, or they want an exit. But at the end, they want to see their money back. And if they don't expect money back, they will not invest, and it will impact the investment chain even in the beginning. So that's very important. So we need more exits in Europe. We need corporates that buy more deep tech startups. Now we see in France we have a lot of large companies, much more than a lot of other countries in Europe. But they don't buy European companies; they buy otherwise because it's an international market. So that's also a big issue. First, so we need exit from them, and we need them to act as CVCs, so they can put money in their funds or invest directly into the startup. But we prefer that they put money in their fund. And there's a national initiative in France called TB, Initiative TB, that aims to raise up to 6 billion euros from corporates by giving them fiscal reductions, and so this fund will invest in deep tech. So the government took the initiative. So.
Okay. Thank you. So partnerships, ETCI, corporates. Philippe, would you like to add something else?
Well, first of all, I think the first equity gap is never completely filled. It's a moment, I think it was mentioned before, of extreme high risk, not only technology risk, and also commercial risk. So there is a continuous need to put money again into this asset class, be it through financing venture capitalists or through investing yourself in startups. As far as scale-ups are concerned, I did mention the Belgian Growth Fund. So in what types of funds did we invest with the Belgian Growth Fund? Well, if you look at Flanders, I think there were maybe 2, 3 usual suspects that were really scale-up funds. So apart from that, we had to go around Europe and look for funds, French funds, Dutch funds, that were also willing to look to Flanders. And so that's where I think our added value lay, that we could actually attract and lure some of these funds to Belgium and start to invest in Belgium. Because these funds, they have the knowledge, they have the scale to really bring companies from the startup phase to the scale-up phase and beyond. So that is really one of the challenges that we faced there. It wasn't always successful, but still, if you look at the deal flow of these funds, we think we did a decent job. But you still need to nurture or funnel this deal flow, so you have a need for a continuous stream of good startups. So that's why you always need to invest in the first equity gap as well.
Thank you. Last question is about the gender balance in deep tech. So it should be intuitive that with the growth of a company, there should be a more diverse team, but this is not exactly what we see in reality. So what are you doing to kind of offset a bit this gender imbalance in deep tech? Antigone.
Okay, of course there is, although there are some subsectors of the deep technology, let's say, that women's prevail, like I think the life sciences subsector. What we do, we lead first by example. We have 70% of our staff and executives are women, but it happened. It happened. It's not by, and 40% in the board of director. The board of director members are also women. What we do is we encourage the fund managers to have more women in their investment teams because this is essential. Also, the adoption of all the ESG criteria, this is also essential. And I believe that since the challenge is how to attract talent, we don't have the luxury to select men or women. The challenge, the bet is to attract the best talent. I believe that the new generations do not even consider it as an issue. And we will soon see more funds and more deep tech companies to have a balanced head count, let's say, in women or men.
Okay, and how about you?
Yes, I won't be very original on this. I mean, the main thing is to have more women that select the project and invest in the project. So we try to have gender balance in the investment committees. For that the main thing, but of course, deep tech entrepreneurs are, for the moment, are mainly men, like 90%. But one thing we observe is that we have a competition called IPHD for the best deep tech startup project with PhDs on it, and we see that almost 1/3 of the laureates are women. So it's the younger generation that is coming, and then we try to create a community of women entrepreneurs, PhD entrepreneurs, and make them testimony that the only way is to create more and more balance.
Thank you. Philippe?
Yes, it's a question that was being asked to us as well in our board as by investors in one of our funds. You mentioned correctly ESG. ESG has environment, but it also has social and governance, and there is the gender diversity is also an item. So the importance of ESG has risen tremendously in the last couple of years. So I don't think it's feasible now to invest in a company, especially if you have institutional investors, and not have an ESG questionnaire, ESG reporting. We even have discussion even today whether it's still feasible as a fund to raise money and not be an Article 8 or Article 9 SFDR fund, but still be an Article 6 fund. For the institutional investors, it's not feasible anymore. So the importance of not only the environmental part, but also social and governance part is extremely, has risen tremendously. And so leading by example, we would have loved to, but we have to admit that we don't do a good job there. So it's an issue. One of our functions or one of our roles as PNV, a government-owned investment company, is not only to invest money, but also to recruit and train junior people so that they then later on can nurture the venture capital and private equity world. So we really have a role to play there, especially in recruiting junior people to make sure that the diversity is there as well. So it's
since the beginning somehow.
it is a beginning, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So before I dig into more questions to our panelists, would you like to ask any questions from the public?
Sure. Yes, thank you for an interesting debate. I'm Karl Arnaud from SEPS. I mean, if I look at this, I sometimes have my doubts because what you hear, like in banking as well, we privatize the gains and we nationalize the losses. What do you do to make sure, or say, what is the vision to make sure that the money which is put in by the state contributes to the public interest, and that once something goes well, it's not taken away and privatized, which I think is an issue which is well known in Leuven at university. All the spin-offs are rapidly privatized. People run away with this. If it doesn't work, it's up to the state to solve the problem.
Who would you like to take it? Okay.
Yeah, well, our as PMV, 100% government owned, we have set ourselves a goal of at least have a return that is the cost of the debt of the government. And so we say that, okay, if we manage to at least have that return, everything that is above it or all the impact for society is for free for the society. And so up until now, we managed to reach that. Our investments are in equity are always together with private players. So the valuations and so on, they're all set the same. So there we invest like a private player. For our loans, there are certain benchmarks we have to look at. As far as spin-offs are concerned, I think, yeah, the example that you mentioned, I think that was especially a thing of the past. I think universities and also research organizations have organized themselves better over the last 10 years, maybe, technology transfer offices and so on. So we have harsh discussions sometimes when financing a startup on the IP, the value of an IP. It's not a free ride anymore. So not for private investors and not for us either.
Thank you.
To be honest, I don't know if I have all the elements to answer this question right now. Of course, there's always cooperation. The first thing in deep tech creation is maybe sometimes research cooperation, and research cooperation together can be fruitful, and that lead to international project. To be honest, for the moment, our scope is more European because we of course have sovereignty issues on many subjects, and that's more of our focus today.
Yes, I think the overall environment, unless somebody is saying the opposite, is still a bit domestic, and because typically national promotional banks and funds like what you see today have a domestic mandate. So if you want to create international partnerships, then it's more up to the development finance institutions where you find this dimension that you're looking for.
Yes, either finance or universities. But
yeah. I think there was another question there. Yes?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Cristiano Evergori. I work for a consulting firm here in Brussels called Flashman Hillard. And I have a question related to a point that has been made earlier about the fact that the money is there and we need to find a way to channel it to startups and possibly scale ups as well. And so I wanted to ask you, to the panel at large, if you have a perspective on what should the next steps be for the EU Capital Markets Union as one of those tools to channel the money. It's back on the agenda, not only of the Commission, also other institutions in the EU are thinking about this. Recently, the ECB came up with a perspective on it. And there's different approaches, right? Whether we need capital markets first and then we go to the union later, or whether what's missing is actually the union element rather than the capital markets, which are supposedly already there. So just an open question to see if you have a perspective on it. Thank you.
Do you want to start?
Yes, I believe that we need to put the union first. That is my personal point of view, and let me share with you a concern that we have in Greece. In order to retain talent, you understand that the salaries in Greece are much lower than the ones in Germany or even in France or in other countries. So you understand there's an internal competition within Europe. I don't know how this issue can be tackled, but there are inefficiencies, there are different categories of salaries, and I think this is an issue that we should reflect upon because, you know, our engineers are leaving, our doctors are leaving, and they're trying to make a future in other countries. So how can we name us all a union, and we're talking about state aid regulation and pari passu basis, so on and so forth, when within our borders of the union there are these differences. So I would put the union first, and I think capital market union, if this is what you suggest, can follow. And also for the provision of the capital to the scale-ups and startups in the European level, I have the recent example of the EIC. I think it's going great, although there are still some countries, Greece included, that we perform some boosting activities in order to increase the reach of the Greek companies to these European funds. But I think they're getting simpler a bit. I have this idea. Hmm? You think? I think so.
Okay, that's good. Would you have a different perspective? Yes, of course. On this, I mean, you have me on your side ever. Simpler rules, Commission. Would you like to add anything else on the capital? No. Okay.
Well, I think the issue is
yeah.
the percentage of the assets that insurers and pension funds are willing to put into venture capital and private equity. And of course, there's the high risk, technological risk, commercial risk. There's also the liquidity risk, and that is another one, an important one. And so while fundraising, we often had these discussions because in Belgium, the percentage that these insurers and pension funds are putting into venture capital private equity is really low compared to other countries. And so we often had the discussion like, what should we do to make it higher? But yeah, then you feel it, okay, we're fairly small, all the decisions are being made outside of Belgium. And so with the Belgian Growth Fund, there was actually a way to channel the money to private equity venture capital. That was done through a hybrid scheme where part of the investment was done through a loan that the insurers gave to SFPIM, the Federal Investment Company, and part was directly in equity. And that lowered the risk, gave a fixed return to the insurers, at least for part of their investment. And so that was a way to get some money out of them, but still not enough in my view, but okay.
Thank you, Philippe. So one last question, I think Renato wanted to, and then wrap up. We can't hear you.
Renato Giacon, Associate Director for EU Funding and MPBI's Relations at Ruth Pedersen. I had the privilege to work with the Greek government on the setup of the loan facility of the RRF when I was at the BRD, and I was indeed very struck by the proactive approach of the Greek government, but I had more visibility on the debt side. I was wondering to what extent your experience with the RRF, but foreign equity instruments, can be also replicated in other contexts, in other countries, now that Spain, Italy, and others are trying to learn from the Greek experience. So any recommendation that you might have? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I'm very proud actually for what we have achieved with the RRF, because I think we are the first or the second country in the European Union that we set up an equity platform from the loan part of the RRF facility. To be completely honest, we have to wait a little bit to see if the RRF authorities will, let's say, respect the terms that we have agreed upon. Because what we did is our milestone is the signing of the fund agreements. It's not the actually investment in the final. We have shared this experience with our colleagues from CDP. I don't know. You're here, and Alessandro, and we were trying, let's say, when you were setting up, you wanted to set up a similar equity instrument. We received no comments from the European Union units, actually. So I think we did a very good job, and we were supported by the government because they realized what it's all about. And I think that our Prime Minister and the next private equity guy, so this helped a lot. And also our Deputy Minister in charge of us also was an EIF executive. So you understand, if you have the right people in the right positions, then things can move. Have I replied, or you wanted something? Okay. Thank you.
Very right on this, because in Italy, and I don't know in Spain how it went, but in Italy, I must say that it's key the relationship with the government, and it's not necessarily obvious that they talk to us, you know. So we may learn things by surprise.
You have to educate the politicians.
Yes, 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 yes.
And there was a time that we were describing the term venture capital, and there were executives in the public sector, in the Ministry of Finance in Greece, and they were saying, "Oh, venture capital. Sounds like an offshore, a tax evasion." So they didn't know. But happily, the last years we are that fortunate to have people that I understand. That we understand.
Thank you very much. I think very interesting questions. So I would like now to ask you one last statement to each one of you. Maybe we start with you, David.
Yes. Yes.
Wrap up on this new innovation agenda.
Yeah,
And your role.
I mean, when I see the new innovation agenda, one thing that is key to me is the talent, and with one thing to know, you don't have to be a PhD or a researcher to create a deep tech startup. I mean, we have to attract talents that created businesses that sold it, or people that work in large groups, or alumni from engineer school to go to the universities and to create startup. We need more market pull startup, a deep tech startup. For the moment, we are very techno push oriented, but we need more market pull people that identify an opportunity on the market, a need, and then they go to the lab to take the technology to launch a startup.
Thank you. Philippe?
I think we should
1 minute.
look at Europe for scale and for providing the framework. Oh, that's the Belgian weather we hear, yeah. And so providing a framework, a fruitful framework where it's good to be an entrepreneur. I heard about employee stock option plans, for example. The taxing of it, for example, was a huge issue in Belgium. So, I mean, a good legal regulatory framework, and then the scale with initiatives like Etsy. I'm not sure Europe should really be involved in individual investments in companies like EIC is doing. I'm not 100% convinced about that. So I would say let's everybody have and play their role.
Thank you. Antigone?
I'm very happy with this holistic approach in the new agenda because it has tackled very important issues, as I mentioned earlier. A last comment would be that the European Union should stop copying or trying to reach US or Asia or whatsoever. It has unique characteristics, unique qualities, and we should find our new identity, where Europe should need to go, we want Europe to be. We have very special characteristics that we can build on and, lead the way.
Great. Thank you.